I didn't know the exact moment our family began to break. For a long time, I believed families broke during loud arguments, slammed doors, or moments when someone finally said something unforgivable. But ours didn't fall apart like that. It happened quietly, slowly, in a way that felt almost invisible while it was happening. It happened through silence. When I think about my childhood, the first thing that comes to mind isn't laughter or sadness, it's order, structure, routine. My father believed discipline was the highest form of love. My mother believed responsibility was the proof of care. And so our home ran like a system, efficient, predictable, and emotionally distant. My father woke up before the sun every morning. I remember the sound of his alarm cutting through the quiet house, the soft click of the light switch, the smell of tea brewing while the rest of us slept. By the time I woke up, he was already gone, carrying the weight of providing for us without ever explaining what that weight felt like. My mother filled the house with movement, cooking, cleaning, planning, remembering things for everyone else. She rarely sat still. When she did, it was only for a moment, as if rest itself was something she wasn't allowed to fully accept. They never said, "I love you." They didn't need to, at least not in their minds. Love was there in packed lunches, paid school fees, ironed clothes, and lights turned off to save electricity. Love was practical. Love was quiet. As a child, I learned quickly that emotions didn't belong in this house. You didn't complain. You didn't cry unless it was serious. You didn't talk back. You adjusted. So I adjusted. I became the easy child, the one teachers praised, the one relatives compared their children to, the one who never caused trouble. Every time someone said, "Why can't you be more like them?" a small part of me disappeared. No one noticed. My younger brother was different. He argued, he questioned, he expressed anger and sadness without apology. Sometimes my father clashed with him so hard it felt like the walls were shaking. Other times, my mother would quietly step between them, trying to soften words that were already too sharp. I rarely fought. I watched instead. I learned to read rooms before entering them. I learned to speak only when necessary. I learned that being needed was safer than being honest. As I grew older, something began to feel wrong. Not painful, just heavy, like I was carrying something I didn't know how to put down. I felt pressure even on good days, even when everything was fine. When it came time to choose my future, the decision felt less like a choice and more like an obligation, a stable career, a respectable path, something that would never embarrass the family. I didn't argue. I nodded. I told myself happiness could wait. That was the first lie I told myself, and it would not be the last. Years passed in routines so familiar they blurred together. College, job, promotion, responsibility. I became excellent at performing life, very bad at feeling it. People called me successful. My father spoke about me with pride. My mother worried quietly, sensing something she didn't know how to name. And still I felt empty. Not broken, not depressed, just unfinished. The first real shift happened when my mother got sick. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. It began with exhaustion she couldn't explain, pain she ignored, meals she skipped because she was busy. Then came doctor visits that lasted longer than expected. Then test results that required follow-up conversations. Fear entered our house without asking permission. My father reacted the only way he knew how. He tightened control. Everything needed to be perfect. Schedules, expenses, decisions. Control made him feel safe, and when he felt unsafe, he became harder to reach. My brother rebelled. I absorbed everything. I became the organizer, the planner, the emotional translator. I managed appointments, finances, conversations. I stood between everyone, making sure no one said the wrong thing at the wrong time, and slowly I disappeared again. One night, after a long hospital visit, something inside me gave up. Sitting at the dining table, exhaustion heavy in my bones, I told my parents I needed a break. Not from them, I said quickly, just from everything. I needed space, time, silence. My father didn't understand. He said rest was a luxury. He said family came before feelings. He said this wasn't the time to think about yourself. I didn't argue. I just said I couldn't breathe anymore. The room went still. My mother looked worried. My brother looked confused. My father looked disappointed. No one spoke after that. That silence followed me for weeks. Eventually, I left. Not in anger, not in drama. I accepted a job in another city. Everyone told themselves it was temporary. I told myself it was survival. At first, distance felt like relief. I could think. I could sleep. I could exist without constantly managing everyone else's emotions. I called home often in the beginning, then less, then only when necessary. My mother called the most. She never accused, never complained. She asked about my health, my meals, my work. She told me small stories about home, as if trying to keep me connected to a place I was slowly leaving behind. I answered politely, briefly. I told myself I would visit soon. Soon became later. Later became someday, and someday kept moving further away. Work filled my life. Success arrived slowly. Promotions, praise, independence. From the outside, everything looked right. From the inside, something felt unfinished, and I didn't know yet that time was already running out.
I didn't notice the distance growing at first. It didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like progress. I was building a life. I was busy. I was tired in a way that felt earned, not draining. I told myself that adulthood required sacrifice, and that sacrifice sometimes looked like absence. The city I moved to was louder than home, brighter, faster. People walked with purpose, faces forward, eyes focused on where they were going. No one asked questions that mattered. No one expected explanations. I liked that. I rented a small apartment close to work. It wasn't special, but it was mine. For the first time, my time belonged to me alone. I could come home late. I could eat whenever I wanted. I could sit in silence without worrying about what anyone else needed. Freedom felt like oxygen. At first, I called home every few days, then once a week, then only when my mother called first. I always answered her, always, even when I was tired, even when I didn't feel like talking. Her voice grounded me in a way nothing else did. She never talked about her illness unless I asked. She didn't want to worry me. She spoke about normal things, neighbors, weather, food she tried to cook but didn't have the energy to finish. Small details meant to make everything sound fine. I believed her because it was easier. My father rarely called. When he did, conversations were short and practical. Work, money, plans. He never asked how I felt. I never offered. My brother called sometimes, usually frustrated. He complained about home, about responsibility, about how things had changed. I listened, offered advice, and told him to stay strong. I didn't realize I was telling him the same lies I told myself. Months passed, then years. Life filled up with milestones I never paused to celebrate properly. Promotions, raises, new responsibilities. People congratulated me. I smiled, I nodded, I went back to work. At night, when things were quiet, a strange emptiness returned. I pushed it away by staying busy. Late nights, extra projects, social plans I didn't really enjoy but accepted anyway. Staying distracted felt safer than thinking. My mother's calls became less frequent. I told myself she was resting more. I told myself fewer calls meant improvement. I told myself I would visit soon. Soon became later. Later became next month. Next month became after this project. One afternoon, in the middle of a meeting, my phone vibrated. My brother's name appeared on the screen. He never called during work hours. I stepped outside. He told me our mother had been admitted to the hospital. His voice was calm, but I recognized the effort behind it. I asked what happened. He hesitated. That hesitation frightened me more than any answer could have. I told him I would come soon. I meant it, but I didn't leave that day, or the next. I told myself I needed to finish things properly. I told myself she was in good hands. I told myself I would arrive calmer, more useful, if I waited just a little longer. I didn't understand yet that waiting was a choice. 3 days later, my phone rang again. This time, my brother didn't speak right away. That silence told me everything. My mother was gone. I don't remember what I said after that. I don't remember how I ended the call. I remember sitting down on the floor of the stairwell because my legs refused to hold me anymore. The world didn't stop. People passed by, cars honked, someone laughed nearby. Everything continued as if nothing had happened. I traveled home in silence. No music, no calls, no thoughts I could hold on to. Just the road and a growing weight inside my chest that felt heavier with every mile. The house looked the same. That was the worst part. Her shoes were still near the door. The kitchen still smelled faintly of spices. The calendar on the wall still had dates circled in her handwriting. But she wasn't there. My father looked smaller than I remembered, older, tired in a way that had nothing to do with work. My brother avoided my eyes. The funeral passed like a dream I couldn't wake from. People hugged me, told me to be strong, said my mother was proud of me. I wanted to ask them how they knew that. That night, after everyone left, I walked through the house slowly, touching familiar things as if they might disappear too. In the bedroom, I found her notebook. It wasn't a diary, it was a planner. Lists of groceries, doctor appointments, bills to pay, reminders written carefully so she wouldn't forget anything, and my name, over and over again. Call them. Ask if they're eating properly. Don't disturb, they're busy. Pray for them. I sat on the floor and read every page. That's when grief finally arrived. Not as tears, as regret so sharp it felt physical. I realized how many calls I ignored, how many visits I postponed, how many moments I assumed would still be there later. Later never came. My father and I barely spoke during those days. We moved around each other carefully like strangers sharing a space filled with memories neither of us knew how to touch. One evening, while sitting in the living room with the lights off, he finally spoke. He told me she used to sit by the window every night with her phone in her hand. He told me she never complained about my absence. He told me she defended me when anyone questioned why I didn't visit more often. He said she believed distance didn't mean lack of love. I couldn't answer. I stayed longer than planned, not because I knew what to do, but because leaving again felt wrong. And slowly, something began to shift.
Staying felt unfamiliar at first. I had spent so many years learning how to leave that I didn't know how to remain without feeling restless. The house held too many memories, and every room seemed to echo with her absence. Yet leaving again felt like another kind of betrayal, one I didn't trust myself to survive. So I stayed. The days after the funeral passed quietly, too quietly. My father woke up early out of habit, but there was no rush in his movements anymore. He sat longer at the table, staring at nothing. My brother avoided home whenever he could, spending hours outside, returning late with tired eyes and questions he didn't know how to ask. We existed in the same space without truly touching each other's grief. One morning, I found my father standing in the kitchen, holding one of my mother's cups. He wasn't drinking from it, he was just holding it, his fingers wrapped tightly around the handle, as if letting go might erase something important. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. But that was the first moment I realized grief doesn't always need words. Sometimes it just needs witnesses. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, without planning to, we began to talk. Not about her at first, about practical things, repairs, groceries, small tasks that kept the house functioning. Then, one evening, while sorting old documents, my father paused and said her name out loud for the first time since the funeral. His voice cracked. He apologized, not to me, but to the empty room, for not noticing when she was tired, for assuming she would always be there, for confusing control with care. That apology changed something between us. For the first time, I saw my father not as the figure who shaped my silence, but as a man who had also been afraid of losing control, afraid of failing his family, afraid of emotions he didn't know how to express. That night, we talked for hours. He told me about his childhood, about growing up in a home where affection was rare and survival was the only priority, about learning early that softness invited danger, about promising himself that his family would never feel insecure, even if it meant being emotionally distant. He told me he thought love meant protection, and protection meant rules, structure, control. I told him I thought love meant understanding, and that silence was how I learned to survive in his world. We both realized we had been trying to love each other using languages the other one didn't speak. That understanding didn't erase the past, but it softened it. My brother joined those conversations slowly, at first with sarcasm, then with honesty. He admitted his anger wasn't really about rules or responsibility. It was about feeling unheard, about feeling like the loud one because quiet people were noticed more. For the first time, we listened to each other without preparing defenses. Healing didn't arrive as forgiveness, it arrived as acceptance. I stayed home longer than I had planned. Work felt distant and unimportant in comparison. When I finally returned to the city, I carried something different with me. Not closure, but clarity. Life resumed, but it didn't feel the same. I called my father regularly. Sometimes we talked about practical things. Sometimes we sat in silence on the phone, both of us unwilling to be the first to hang up. My brother began opening up in ways he never had before. We laughed occasionally. That surprised me the most. I kept my mother's notebook, not as a reminder of guilt, but as a lesson. I learned that love doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it waits quietly, hoping to be noticed, and sometimes it runs out of time. I learned that distance doesn't protect us from pain, it only delays it. I learned that silence can feel safe, but it always charges interest. If you're listening to this and there's someone you haven't called because life feels busy or complicated, I need you to understand something. Busy ends. Complicated changes. Time does not wait. You don't need perfect words. You don't need explanations. You just need presence. Because one day, all that remains will be a voice you can no longer answer and a conversation that can never be finished. I once believed leaving was strength. Now I know staying is braver. And love, real love, isn't proven by sacrifice alone. It's proven by showing up while you still can.